Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to take you for a quick and extremely exciting gallop through a range of ideas. So put your phones away and pay great attention because this is going to be very interesting. First point, I've changed the title of the presentation. It's gone to the red thread. The reason is that this is an idea that is used a great deal across most of Europe. In the 18th century, the Royal Navy was the world's largest consumer of rope, and it got stolen a lot, so they threaded a red thread through all of their rope so that if you stole any Royal Navy rope, you'd know where it came from. It means something that threads its way right the way through a series of different ideas. It was popularized by Goethe in the 18th century, so that's where it comes from, and you can relate that to people who want to know about it, better than golden thread. Just a few words about iProov. That's a picture of me on television in 2008 as the chairman of mBlocks, which at that time was the world's largest process of carrier billing. We were involved in one of the first large-scale frauds. Journalist asked me, Mr. Budd, the role of you and your company in this scandal, were you complicit or just recklessly incompetent? I set up iProov to make sure that neither I nor any of my customers would ever be asked that question again when confronted with frauds arising from authentication. We're about 200 people worldwide. We're a deep technology company, loads of patents, raised a shed load of money. We are the world's leading provider of biometric liveness. Let's talk about identity. You've been hearing a lot today about decentralized identity, and it's worthwhile just realizing how dramatically the world has changed. Most places in the world still use centralized identity. One of the world's most successful examples is SingPass, which is a national digital identity that is used by everyone in Singapore to do anything that involves the government. There's a big database, there's a big system, all the inquiries come in, it's a honeypot, but it's extremely well done. EIDAS-1 was all about trying to build a federated system. Didn't really work very well in government applications, worked much better in company applications, but there were problems of interoperability, there were problems of performance, and there were problems of scale. For years, people have been talking since the mid-teens. People like Andy Tobin have been pioneering the idea of self-sovereign identity, but it's stayed very much a kind of a geekish edge case idea, really until the last few years when it has changed to become decentralized identity, whether we're talking about verifiable credentials or whether we're talking about MDLs. The advantages of decentralized identity, which undoubtedly make it the future, in addition to those that Marie just talked about, are the fact that it scales brilliantly and that it is incredibly resilient. Because it is the way that it's been designed is privacy protecting, but that also makes it very difficult for foreign hostile powers, organized crime, to break into anything and fiddle with or survey people. So it's an incredibly strong infrastructure for what will become a critical national infrastructure for every country in the world. So it's scalable, it's highly resilient and secure, and it's incredibly flexible, as you just heard from Marie. For that reason, decentralized identity, which I'm going to say it again, and even 3 years ago was still just a technological twinkle, is no longer a technological twinkle. It's not just happening in the EU with the digital identity wallet. The Department of Homeland Security is starting to roll it out for a whole series of applications in CBP and USCIS. We heard this morning about the fabulous work that Bhutan has done. Other countries funded by the World Bank are rolling it out. This is beginning to happen. It is the future of identity, and it changes everything. Now, how does biometrics fit in with all of this? Well, let's just have a look at some key proof points that take place along the decentralized identity lifecycle. Firstly, the first thing that happens in a decentralized identity is the credential gets issued. It's really important to make sure that the credential, the driving license, the birth certificate, the certificate to practice medicine on people's wet bits inside actually belongs to the person who's requesting them and belongs to the person whose wallet this stuff is being put into. It's an unbelievable security bottleneck, a security breakpoint there. So it's got to be issued to the right person. Authentication is critical. You have to be sure that this is the person entitled to these credentials. Biometrics is a vital way of ensuring that the person to whom you're issuing the credential is whom they claim to be, and that's why in California, for example, when issuing the digital driving license as a verifiable credential, they use biometrics to be sure of that fact. Now I've got this wallet. It's all very well that the information in it is secure, but how does the relying party know that actually the owner of the wallet is the person who's controlling it? That the wallet hasn't fallen into the hands of somebody else, that it's not being operated by somebody else? So there is a moment at which the user has to authenticate themselves securely to the wallet. Now, that's a big change to what's happened in the past. Because in the past, it was always the verifier, the relying party, who did the authentication. They said, somebody's rocked up to see me, and I'm going to make sure they are who they claim to be. But in a decentralized identity world, that doesn't really work. So we're going to have a new paradigm in which a person authenticates themselves to their own wallet, and that information gets transferred in a decentralized way to the relying party. How's that going to work? What we think is going to happen is that the authenticating process will issue, like authenticating organization, will issue a perishable credential, a certificate of authenticity with a timestamp on it, into the user's wallet at that moment, and that certificate of authenticity becomes part of the assertion that the wallet makes to the relying party. This has a number of very elegant features to it, privacy and all that kind of good stuff, but it has some problems to do with money flows, as Andy talked about this morning. So that's the right way to do it, but there's still some way to go. There's also an issue of trust frameworks. So the verifying party gets this certificate. If their certificate of authenticity was issued by iProov, they go, iProov, they're good guys, they're globally known, we trust them. But if it was issued by a company, if the certificate of authenticity was issued by what the Italians call Signor Pinco Pallino, then they kind of go, how do I know whether this is worth the paper, the digital paper that it was printed on? So there's going to be a problem of trust trust frameworks. In Europe, they've tried to solve this by saying if you're going to use your EU digital identity wallet, it had better be authenticated to level of assurance high. And at the moment, there's a big debate going on inside Europe over the standards as to what level of assurance high actually means. And it'll be interpreted probably in different ways. So there's a trust framework issue as to how the verifying party knows how well it was authenticated. What may happen is the verifying parties kind of go, we don't believe all this stuff. So we're going to do our own authentication, and they may do it by becoming an issuer, authenticating the user, issuing a certificate of authenticity themselves back into the user's wallet and then reading it back. So there are some strange and slightly unnatural acts that may occur in order to introduce authentication in general and biometric authentication in particular into the new decentralized identity paradigm, and hasn't all been sorted out. Now you'll notice that I've been cunningly mixing up authentication and biometrics. Why is that? Well, in the end, everything to do with digital identity and digital ID is just a bunch of facts about someone. That's all it is. It's a bunch of facts. But trust does not reside in facts. Trust actually resides in what goes on between people's ears, human beings. So at some point, you have to tie those facts to the real live human being. You can do it with something they know, like a password. That went well, didn't it? You can do it using something they possess, like a mobile phone, which a young man on a bicycle snatched out of my hand in London a few weeks ago. Well, that went well as well. Oh, there's a little point I forgot to mention. In that middle section, what happens when your phone gets stolen from you and you've got 1,000 credentials that you built up in that wallet? How do you recover that, given that you've got no device? The answer is, in all cases, trust resides in a person. The thing that identifies a person is not something they know or something they have. The thing that identifies a person is something they are. And that's biometrics. So ultimately, stripping away all the intermediate steps, biometrics are going to become the fundamental root of trust for authenticity and therefore for the entire decentralized identity ecosystem. Well, that sounds fine. What's hard? How hard can it be? There are three problems that have to be solved when you're authenticating somebody using biometrics. The first is, do they match? Are they whom they claim to be? People still get very excited about this as though somehow it was hard to do face recognition. With a collaborating subject, with somebody who has agency and is wanting to authenticate themselves, modern face matching technology and other biometrics technology are thousands of times better than is necessary to do the job really, really well. They're hundreds of thousands of times better than human beings. So people talked about biometrics as though that was the core of the problem, and it's necessary, but it's fundamentally irrelevant to this topic. It's a solved problem. People worry about biometrics though, because they say, what happens if my face gets stolen? I can reset my passport, but I can't reset my face. This is a category error, because I'm afraid you cannot steal someone's face, at least not without a knife and a lot of blood. You can't steal someone's face. It cannot be stolen. It can be copied, because after all, there's nothing private about a face to begin with. And therefore, the fundamental attack, the fundamental vulnerability of any kind of biometrics, including face, is its resilience to copies. So now we get on to what actually matters when you're doing biometrics. First is, are you seeing, is it actually a real person? Is it a real person, or is it an artifact, like a photograph, or a screen, an image on a screen, or a 3D printed head like that death mask there that my wife absolutely refuses to have in the house? And these are called presentation attacks. Luckily, presentation attacks the technology for doing presentation attacks doesn't change very fast, and therefore technology converges on very good solutions for detecting presentation attacks. Again, people spend a lot of time talking about presentation attacks because it's all mission impossible and masks are such fun and all that kind of thing, but that's not where your attention should be. The third task is the person right there, right now? Is the imagery that you're looking at that of a currently genuinely present human being at all? Or is it a digitally injected imagery? Is it a recording or a deepfake that never went anywhere near a camera and therefore never left any of the cues that artifacts leave when they get put in front of a camera? Is this an image? Is this pixel perfect imagery that has been injected, perhaps through an emulator, directly into the data stream, and that nobody will ever spot is false? Well, not many people were talking about that. Not many people are still talking about that. You know what this is? This is one of the rare photographs from that ghastly tsunami that took place on Boxing Day 2004. There are still people playing on the beach as one of the world's most ghastly tidal waves was coming towards them. That is what today's world of biometric authentication feels like. That we're in an environment in which deepfake, digitally injected deepfakes are a critical threat to the entire identity ecosystem, and most people are still playing on the beach. But actually, it's becoming increasingly clear that everyone is vulnerable now. My daughter, until recently, worked for IProov, the large civil engineers. These are very clever people. They just got defrauded. $25 million got stolen from them about a month and a half ago by a deepfake video conferencing scam that an organization which was sophisticated and skilled in its cyber defenses fell for. They spoofed not just a person, but an entire boardroom. Every individual around that table had been deepfaked. The faces of the board, each one by one, had been replaced. The voices had been replaced one by one, and the whole setup was indistinguishable to the naked eye. This is the future. This is the beginning, the first waves of the tsunami that is coming to the identity ecosystem. Now, we have an unparalleled level of visibility about what's actually happening out in the market now. So I just want to share with you briefly four trends about what is actually happening in the biometrics market now. Firstly, face swaps have exploded as an attack on people's identities. What a face swap is, you put a threat act in front of their camera. They do whatever they have to do, motion, move their heads, do whatever Apple asks you to do. Then you swap their face for that of the victim or that of the non-existent synthetic identity that you're trying to present, and you can do whatever you like. This has been possible for a while, but I want to be clear with you. Until most people still believe that if you scrutinize it carefully enough, you can see it. You know, there are folds around the eyes, or there's a little bit of blurriness around the ears. You are obsolete. The critical thing that has happened in the last 3 to 6 months is that the quality of these things is now indistinguishable to the naked eye. I challenge you to figure out which of these faces is real. It's an attack not just to biometric authentication, but to any kind of video-based authentication, as IProov recently found out. We saw a 700% growth in video injection attacks in the space of 6 months, and it's continuing. There was a lot of skepticism as to whether injection attacks were really a thing or not. It's so much more fun to think about photographs and iPads in front of iPads in front of cameras and masks. Masks are so much fun. Why do we have to stop playing with masks? Injection attacks started by attacking desktop web and mobile web, which are relatively easy to attack. The world has changed. The world has changed dramatically. What we've seen is a 360% growth in the use of mobile phone emulators to attack native software, including now for the first time Apple, who have inadvertently made such attacks much, much easier. So a lot of the traditional methods that were used to detect mobile app security methods that were used to defend against injection attacks by detecting them, gone, because the device itself is bogus from the ground up, and therefore all the mobile app security methods that people claim defend against injection attacks are bypassed. This is a rapidly growing industry worldwide. What we've seen is enormous numbers of threat actors, and they don't just spend a couple of days trying it out. They spend 6 months attacking individual defense methods. You see them bursting, pausing, bursting, pausing, bursting, pausing. These people do not give up. In some cases, we believe they don't give up because they are state-sponsored organizations. I have an image of an entire building in some country far away with 3 floors and a big door at the front. And at the door, there's a big sign at the front which says iProov, and 500 people per floor, all attacking. That's the behavior that we are seeing now, that we saw last year. Fourthly, there is a network. There are large and growing numbers of threat groups, many of them with over 1,000 participants, who talk to each other and exchange research and development. These are distributed research and development laboratories for crime as a service. We can count them. We can watch them. This is not science fiction. This is what is out there now. And as you can see, they're doubling every 6 months in number. So if this makes you feel vaguely uncomfortable, that is the objective, because this is not scaremongering. This is a set of facts of what is actually happening out in the market at the moment. Is that a gospel of doom? No, because in fact it can be prevented. I just want to show you one method, our method of course, but one method which is effective against deepfakes. The way we do it is we illuminate the user's face with a rapidly changing sequence of colors, and then we stream the video of their face back to our servers while they're doing it, and we study the way that the light reflects off their face, an unpredictable sequence of colors. And the way that the light reflects off their faces, and it interacts with the ambient illumination, spatially and spectrally tells us whether we're looking at a three-dimensional, live, skin-covered, human face-shaped object or not. And the sequence of colors, which is unpredictable and changes each time, tells us whether what we're looking at is a video that was born in real time or not. The thing that makes this effective against deepfakes is that it creates a very weird challenge for the attackers. Has it frozen? Excellent. Let's try that again, shall we? It creates a very weird challenge for the attackers. The attackers don't have the data sets necessary to forge this kind of challenge with sufficient precision to get it right first time. And because they don't get it right first time, we can see them doing it. That's really important. And it's really important in the context of defending against these sorts of attacks. I'll jump over this because you saw it before. You cannot defend against deepfakes in general, and you cannot defend against deep biometric attacks on identity in particular using a piece of technology. A disk is not a defense, any more than it was in the days of antivirus. Hands up those of you who bought an antivirus solution with no back-end monitoring and maintenance service behind it. You'd have been nuts. Today, a very high percentage of defenses against biometric attacks are just like that. And it doesn't work because you're in an environment with deepfake attacks in digitally injected is changing with an incredible rapidity. So the only way to defend against this is to ensure total visibility of everything that's happening, to draw out those examples of attacks, to actually catch them while they're experimenting, study and replicate what they're doing, and build defenses against it, to continuously keep adapting to the attack environment, to stay one step ahead of the attackers, whatever their resources, on the basis that there is an information asymmetry. We as defenders, by watching, learn more about them than they learn about us on every attempt. And that information asymmetry, coupled with the oddness of what we're doing, gives us the ability to stay ahead of what is otherwise a mortal threat. The result is that we've got loads of accreditations, both for cybersecurity and for accessibility. I'll end just by saying, how do you know whether a technology is any good in this area? The answer is testing is still a huge problem. There are no certifications, there are no tests for this. All you can do is to look at the organizations that have actually gone through proper due diligence and trust them to do so. I'll just end by saying one of the logos up there, in fact the two of the logos up there, Department of Homeland Security and Eurostar, for those of you who ever travel from London from St Pancras on Eurostar, I do encourage you, sign up with SmartCheck, the Eurostar couch to gate service, which cuts out ticket checks, cuts out exit passport checks, and enables you to actually experience what decentralized identity in a travel environment, biometrically enabled, feels like today. Thank you very much indeed.